So I'm Nate Warfield, and we can't stop here because this is bot country. So I'd like to start with sort of a briefer on why is this an interesting topic? To me, I think network security is very important, and I feel like today it's kind of one of those things that gets overlooked by a lot of people. You know, we're busy with patching, we're busy with worrying about phishing, and we're kind of forgetting about the network that's sitting there running everything in the back. Cities and network equipment are getting exploited very, very quickly today too. Sometimes it's days. I've even seen them exploited in a matter of hours from when they get disclosed. Attacks are becoming more precise, right? I think we're kind of over the days of these sort of cluster bomb, WannaCry, not petya type attack. And people are using targeted ransomware to shut down businesses, to hold, in the United States, we're seeing this happen with state agencies and governments. TravelX in the UK got their entire network shut down right around the new year. They were got into with the Pulse VPN was the way they got into the network. And these devices, because they sit at the edge of your network, they're a really good place for lateral movement, right? And attackers, if they get into your VPN device, they've probably got access to maybe Active Directory, they've maybe got access to different user accounts, or just your entire network is back there. And holes in your network do exist. As much as you think you have it secured, I guarantee you, point me at it, I'll find some way that you didn't think was there. And it's imperative that you find these things before someone that's like me, but not as responsible as me, finds them and shuts you down. When we're looking at the risk, I kind of split it into two halves. First off, we have the consumer scale risk, and this is not stuff that we don't know about, but it's things like old ISP routers, right? We've got some shots here of a bunch of Ubiquity routers that someone hacked into, and they left a note saying, "I hacked this thing, please help me." D-Link has been decommissioning a bunch of their routers, not offering software updates for them, so any vulnerabilities that are found are going to be out there for the end of time. All right, didn't cut out. Home appliances, right? We're starting to plug everything is IoT. Everybody wants connected devices. This is kind of a joke of somebody surfing one of the hub websites on a refrigerator at a appliance store in the United States. Home media, we've got TVs, smart TVs. Smart TVs are being put into the internet. Android debug images for either cell phones or some of the Wi-Fi hotspots. All this stuff gets plugged in the internet, and people just leave it there. The risk here is not so much they're going to get into your network with these things, but more that these devices will get exploited and then repurposed to attack your network. When we start looking at, and the FBI was nice enough to remind us, don't forget to change your refrigerator password. If you said that to somebody 20 years ago, they probably would have looked at you like, what are you even talking about? But this is the world we live in. When we look at the enterprise scale and the risk there, it's not anything that we're not accustomed to, right? It's people forgetting to patch. Right? This is the number, as of yesterday, of unpatched Citrix devices that are out there on the internet. So there's 14,000 of these things still sitting there. Insecure cloud deployments. The last month showed that any business, no matter how big, it can have these misconfigurations or a little bit of an oversight that ends up being a very bad PR thing. Fortunately, this was responsibly disclosed, but someone less responsible could have probably done something worse with it. Network hardware. This was a terrifying find. 12,000 Cisco routers. The banner message when you log into these things tells you, well, the banner on the router says, here's the username, here's the password. When you log in, you're level 15, which is the router version of system out there running telnet of null things. And then server ILO. There's many, many examples. These are the top ones that I just wanted to illustrate. But your lights out management for your server probably should not be on the internet. That's supposed to be in your data center, not exposed where anybody can hit it. So how do I kind of find these things? I like to look at both the attack threshold or the attack surface from the internet, and then also systems that are attacking other systems on the internet. Some of these tools, Census, many people have probably heard of. I don't use it as much as others, but it's a really good resource. Binary Edge, they're fairly new, very powerful. Actually, Binary Edge was the tool that the researcher who found the Microsoft database leak, he used Binary Edge to find it. BGP View, I'm going to get into this a little bit more later. It's mostly just for figuring out autonomous systems and routing and what networks are owned by who. But my two favorite tools would be Shodan and Grey Noise. I'm fortunate enough to work for a company like Microsoft where they buy the very expensive enterprise license for me, so I get to play with all the fun features. And then Grey Noise, I've been using them for a year and a half, and it's a really fantastic system that has a network of sensors, and it basically looks at all the internet traffic that's going non-discriminately being sprayed, either with port scans, targeted attacks. It stores all of this, and then it applies a heuristic against the traffic, and it can identify what type of an attack was it, what type of a botnet was it, and so you can start to mine through this data and start looking for patterns. So, kind of going to start with Grey Noise here, the malicious traffic. Gray noise has about 15 million IP addresses that it's seen sort of programmatically scanning the internet looking for stuff. 6 million of those it can tell right off the bat are malicious based on the heuristics that it has. I kind of did a small sample of some of the tags that it assigns. There's 360 odd tags that it uses. I don't have space to show you all that here, but every single country on Earth is doing this. And what really was surprised to me is even Antarctica has a machine that's doing some sort of malicious activity, right? All the way down there, some machine has been hacked into and it's doing something weird. Now, there's another 9 million addresses that Gray noise doesn't know what they are. And usually when they say it's unknown, it just means they don't have a heuristic for it. So whatever the traffic is doing might be bad, but once a heuristic is developed, and gets applied, then you usually see tens or hundreds of thousands of machines that are actually doing a specific thing. So when we want to go and look, I used Greenland as the example here. So I could pull this in, put the IP address of one of these Greenland malicious machines in, and Gray noise is nice enough to tell me, okay, I've seen this thing doing MS SQL brute forcing and scanning for MS SQL databases. Now, you can flip over to Shodan, and you can see, okay, well, what is this IP address? What is it running? What ports are open? And you'll notice at the bottom, there's a little thing for vulnerabilities. Shodan will try to tell what vulnerabilities the system is exposed to. In this case, this is one of the WebDAV, I believe it was one of the vulnerabilities that the shadow brokers dropped on 2017. And so we know that's weaponized POC. It's almost guaranteed somebody used that vulnerability, hacked into this IAS machine, and has repurposed it to scan the internet for MS SQL and try to brute force databases. And it's also interesting, you'll notice the little red dot there. Shodan consumes Gray noise data. So when you look at an IP, if Gray noise has seen it, Shodan will know it too. But you won't get all the details that you get out of Gray noise, but it's kind of a cool little indicator. So I wanted to say, what does the last 12 months look like? I was kind of curious, what are people looking for on the internet in the last year? So there's 139 different heuristics that are sort of worm-ish. Some of these are RCEs, some of them have actual CVE exploits. I can't really go into all of the details on them. You can talk to me later about that. But when I broke it down, there's 3.9 million IP addresses that are actually doing some sort of wormy activity, right? You'll notice that Eternal Blue, it takes up most of those. So a 3-year-old vulnerability is still it's probably 2 or 3 million machines that are still out there trying to scan and pop and use the Eternal Blue exploit. And this makes up about 68% of malicious traffic that's seen by Gray noise on the internet. The other thing that Gray noise picks up is brute forcers. So I started doing a breakdown of what are all the brute forcings doing. There's 16 different techniques that it can catch a heuristic for. And those make up about 1.5 million IP addresses, which is quite a lot of people trying to brute force. And it's nothing we haven't seen before, right? It's Telnet, it's SSH. It's also a bunch of the administrative tools like RDP and VNC, things that you really shouldn't be opening up to the internet, but people still do anyways. And that comes out to another 26% of the malicious traffic is just brute forcing attempts. I wanted to give you a little illustration of what you can do when you're looking at a specific country. So the other day in my hotel, I said, let me look at what else coming out of Israel. So you can do a breakdown. What I'm filtering down is the only things that have more than 100 IP addresses in them, but here's the top networks in Israel that are out scanning the internet looking for things. Some of the heuristics that it's identified of the traffic that's coming out of Israel. So Mirai is not a big surprise to be the top one. We see a lot of Telnet stuff here. This is fairly common across almost any countries. And then the operating systems, it can detect which OSs are running, which is kind of cool. And like I said, being a network engineer, to me, an autonomous system number is like my neighborhood. That's where I focus on that as my way of mapping out networks. But your top ASNs that are looking for things are also visible in Gray noise. Now, Gray noise it's more than just a reporting mechanism, right? You can start using some of this data for actually forensics and augmenting your other threat intelligence feeds. One of the cool features when you're running their command line client is you can actually take your log file, throw it into this Gray noise analyze. It'll pull out all the IP addresses that it's seen in the log file. It'll push all those IP addresses through Gray noise, and it'll tell you, here's all of the systems that are doing weird things, and here's all the bad actors versus here's your normal customers or your users. This screenshot is just from one of my VMs, so 3 of the attempts were good because that's me SSHing in, and all the rest of them were basically people in China and other countries trying to brute force my SSH server. This is one of the cooler features that it's still in beta, but they allowed me to talk about this. I asked them if it's cool, and they said, yeah. What it's doing is it's what I call a packet capture time machine. So all of this traffic that Gray noise is seeing, it's storing all of it in probably petabytes of PCAPs. Once this thing goes live, you'll be able to say, give me an IP address, give me a time slice, like 6 months ago, I want to see what this IP address did. And it'll chew through this, and it'll drop you out a packet capture file that you can open up in Wireshark. So this example here, I found a machine from back in the fall that was doing MS SQL brute forcing. So I was like, okay, what are they doing? And you can see the username that it's trying, the password that it's trying. Some of the redacted bits are there to protect Greynoise's sensor IPs, because I'm not trying to expose them to people bypassing them. But this is a really cool feature, just being able to look back years ago and see, what did this IP do? What did it do later? For augmenting threat intel data, this was kind of fun. There was a FireEye blog post that was talking about an actor they were going after. I don't even remember what the service was, but buried in the blog post, they mentioned this web server path that this exploit was throwing. So I was like, I wonder if that's in Greynoise. I search it in Greynoise, and lo and behold, there's 200 machines, almost all of them are in China, that are all doing this type of malicious activity that's a known malicious actor. So you could, if you were so inclined, take this list of IPs, put them in your firewall, put them in your block list, and say, hey, you know what? I know this is a bad guy. I don't want to let them in my network. You're not even just be indiscriminate about blocking this traffic, which is, I think, a pretty cool feature. So I kind of wanted to go about an attack timeline. There was this Citrix local file inclusion vulnerability that made the news in the last month. So Citrix disclosed this vulnerability on December 17th of last year. And I think that probably because of the Christmas holidays, a lot of people weren't really looking. They didn't get much news traction for the rest of December. But in January, this guy from Tripwire saw this and decided to dig into it and say, hey, what is this vulnerability? How do you exploit it? What's the risk? So he wrote a very verbose blog post on how to test for it, the exact string that you would send to a NetScaler device to actually see if this thing was vulnerable. So Greynoise added a signature for this the next day. So they said, we should check and see if people are trying to exploit this thing. 1 day later, literally 1 day after they had a signature, they started picking up attack traffic. Now, the screenshot on the bottom left side is actually right from their servers. I said, can you give me the very first IP that you ever saw try to exploit it? And they're like, yes, we can. Here it is. Confirmed, obviously, by their web UI. What's interesting is that the fine folks over at TrustedSec had set up a honeypot to try to catch this same activity. A couple of days later, they pick up the same exploitation attempts using the same techniques. But one thing I want to highlight is we're talking about a 2-day window between POC, basically proof of concept being out, and people trying to exploit this thing. January 10th was a Friday. So it was it's very possible that someone could have not been paying attention to the InfoSec news. They go home for the weekend, they come back in on Monday, their NetScaler's been hacked. Like, that's how little time you have to address this stuff. And if you've worked for a large company, you know how long a change windows and change approval processes can take. If it's a VPN device, your executives aren't going to be real happy when you're rebooting that thing in the middle of the day. But you need to understand that time is not on your side in these things. And then Greynoise even started picking up as the InfoSec community picked up on this and said, hey, we need to start defending ourselves. Attackers shifted it, and they started using URL encoding to try to get around filters that people were putting in place. And Greynoise picks that up too. So it's like, you can try, but you can't really hide when you're doing this indiscriminate scanning. Now, mind you, if someone's targeting an attack at you, Greynoise may not pick this up, but most of these attackers aren't. The other thing I like to look at, so switching over to how do we defend ourselves from this stuff. I do this pretty frequently for customers when I'm asked, usually in preparation for talks like this. And like I said, I like to start with an ASN. This is, if it's an old school network, any company that's been established for a while usually has an autonomous system that they're running behind. The caveat, of course, is if they're in the cloud. That's all going to be from their cloud provider. This is where I start using BGP view, right? I'll say, okay, let me figure out where this is, what's this network, and I start looking for anomalies, like this network in Iran is my favorite network, because they're allegedly a cellular and internet company out of Iran. They've got 1.3 million IP addresses that they own. Now, when we look at Shodan, there's a surprisingly low number of these things online. If you go comparison to the United States, some of the ISPs there, you see millions and millions of things online because it's the modem interfaces. The fact that this one only has 3,000 is kind of weird. We flip over and look at how many systems are scanning the internet out of that ASN. Greynoise tells me almost a third of that autonomous system is scanning the internet. So 400,000 IPs are looking for stuff from a network that's supposedly not really online. So this is weird. It's an anomaly, and I don't really believe in coincidence. So if I find out more about that, you'll hear from me next year. So, like I mentioned, cloud networks can be kind of tricky when you're looking to find attack surface. So that's when I switch over to DNS. And there's another place that Shodan can be super powerful, is it has a feature where you could say, show me all of the hosts that you know about in a domain, right? Most of us have probably used DNS brute forcers or DNS recon and things like that. This is faster. I could just say, Shodan domain, tell me the domain. I kind of singled out Clearview AI, which is very interesting considering the cool setup here at BlueHat with the facial recognition. Clearview is selling facial recognition to the US government. So Shodan has another option. Since they already have IP address or IP information, there is a flag you can throw to this that says, well, show me all the hosts and show me all the ports that these hosts have running. So you don't have to even, you can find this out. You can find out where their footprint is across all of their different environments and what ports are open on those hosts. So another trick, if you're looking for an autonomous system, there's this fun little whois command that you can run. And so I was actually getting a permit for my drone before I came here to Israel, and I figured, okay, let me take a look at this Aero Club. Quickly, one command, I can find out what autonomous system they're running in, and then I can flip over and say, okay, well, what does their domain look like? And in 2 commands, I figured out where they are, and I can also see that they're running RDP on their email server. Probably not the best thing to be doing. Yes, I will email them and let them know. So when we're talking about hunting with Shodan, I don't know how many people have used it, but most people start with a port, right? What port's open on the internet? They start looking that way, or you'll go with products. Shodan can detect different types of products that are out there. It's not an automatic process, so it's not always 100%. But you could say, all right, I want to see all of the Docker machines running on these different ports. Organization is a good way of filtering it down. When you're looking at the entire internet, you can then scope this down to be your organization or the organization that you're doing an assessment for. Here's one of the fun things that I get with a very expensive license, thank you, Microsoft. There's this tag searching, and this is very, very powerful, which is why Shodan keeps it locked behind these licenses. My favorite feature on here is the tag for self-signed. What this lets you do is it lets you search for any machine with a self-signed SSL certificate. One of the most common places you'll see a self-signed SSL certificate is network hardware. So your routers, your load balancers, your firewalls, anything that has a web administration panel, the vendors are going to want to make it secure. You're probably not going to spend the money on a real SSL certificate, so you'll run the self-signed certificate. So every single time I do a self-signed search against a company, I find routers, printers, Polycom phone systems. Like, it's just obscene the amount of stuff that's there. So it's definitely worth the money if you're an enterprise to have this and be able to search this stuff yourself. The other cool feature that you can do with the enterprise license is searching by vulnerability. Now, Shodan uses the common platform enumeration field to identify versions of software, and then it makes an educated guess as to what vulnerabilities might affect this thing. In the case of things like Apache, you may see lots of vulnerabilities. They're not entirely confirmed because it may depend on what module Apache is running. Is it even enabled? But it can also connect and do a program, like an actual test. So it would, like for Citrix, for Pulse, for MS-1710, for Bluekeep, Shodan's actually connecting, running a test script, and confirming that it's vulnerable. You can see this stuff if you go to the IP details of a single host. You'll see, as I mentioned earlier when we were looking at Greenland, that the machine said, oh, it has this vulnerability. Anybody can do that. The thing that you can only do with the enterprise license is searching by vulnerability. So what I have here is I searched for every machine that has not been patched for Bluekeep, and I have a list of 470,000 systems confirmed to be vulnerable, just waiting to get hit. Obviously, with great power comes great responsibility, which is why this is not a feature that just anybody can go and search with. Now, kind of going farther down the rabbit hole, I like to do this stuff. It is very interesting to me to take apart the network traffic and look at an endpoint and try to figure out how can I sort of systematically fingerprint this thing, especially when it's like, oh, it's just running on TCP 443, right? It's an SSL server. There's ways to detect what it actually is. One of the ways you can do it that I like to do, some of this Shodan magic, you can run all of the metadata that Shodan stores, it calls a facet. So you can start enumerating and saying, hey, give me statistics on specific facets that you're interested in, and not only will you get counts, but you'll also be able to tell what some of these facet names are. So, this example, I'm looking, okay, let's show me all of the HTTP WAF devices, right? Your web application firewalls. So not only do I know that Cloudflare is the biggest, but I also know all the names of different WAFs that are out there. So I can then take this, turn it into a search, and say, okay, search for HTTP WAF, F5 Big IP APM, and I'll be able to find every one of these devices that Shodan knows about on the internet. The other cool trick for people that use Shodan, net:0/0 is the entire internet. So you do that, you don't have to worry about, is it an ASN, is it an organization? No, just search for the entire internet and see what you find. Some of the fun stuff that you get into when you're looking, as I mentioned, SSL, it seems like that's going to be hard to fingerprint. Not as much as you would think, right? Some of these vendors of these products, like Kubernetes, for example, they will put an SSL certificate in the product, and the issuer will always be the same thing. So I can say, okay, look for every machine, give me every IP address that has an SSL cert issuer with Kubernetes in it, and there I've got 234,000 Kubernetes machines with a single Shodan query. There's a cool new feature they've added, this facet analysis, which lets you then break it down by organization. That pull down, you can also look by country, by postal code, a whole bunch of other stuff. So you can kind of refine what you're looking for. If you're looking at the entire world, or if you're looking at your specific organization, you can drill down even farther, depending on how many machines you have online. HTTP.html, this is fun. You can actually dig through the HTML of any returned page, and you can search it. So this example here is, these are the Big IP, the F5 Big IP load balancer products. This is one of their admin panels, because when you log out, it has a logout page, and that gets returned in the HTML when Shodan scans it. It says, no, you've been logged out, but you can search this thing, and now I found 25,000 F5 devices sitting there with their admin ports online. HTTP title is another fun one. This is really good for finding home routers and IoT devices. This stuff gets hard-coded. Nobody's ever going to change it. And even if someone knew how to change it, the next time their router got an upgrade, it would most likely get reset. So this is, these are GPON home routers. You can find D-links like this. You can find all sorts of different IoT garbage, honestly, by using this type of a search. And then digging back into the SSL, you can also, I was looking for just VPN devices in general, because most people, when they're building, even if it's a signed SSL cert, not a self-signed cert, they're going to have, well, what is the name of this device on my network? Oh, it's vpn.mycompany.com. Cool. I'm going to go search for anything that has VPN in the SSL search subject. Now I have 265,000 VPN devices, right? You're taking billions of IP addresses and very quickly narrowing it down for your target set, which I think is just fun. So some of the more advanced ways to fingerprint this stuff, like if you're doing this in your own network and you're trying to figure out, what do I have? Some of this stuff gets important too if you're in a company where you acquire another company. So you're acquiring not only the people that work there, their technology, but you're also acquiring all of their technical debt in their network. And all of their network configuration and every design decision or bad decision that they may have made now becomes your responsibility. So when you're trying to find this, trying to find these things, what I do is start off by finding a system that you know is the system that you're looking for. Find this, like if you have your own NetScaler, for example, just hit it. Put the IP address in Shodan, see what Shodan tells you about it. From there, you kind of see there's this little raw data field. You click into the raw data field, and what you get is every single piece of metadata that Shodan has indexed for that host. And so that's all, most of that stuff you can then turn around and you can start searching the rest of the internet or the rest of your organization for. I like the vendor-specific strings because these are stuff that doesn't get changed. Login pages for web servers, things like, for example, the F5 devices have a cookie feature that allows for persistence. That stuff gets stuck in every web request, whether it's good or bad. So you can just find that, start searching it. Path redirection, a lot of these things, because Shodan's hitting it on an IP address and not a DNS name. So many times you hit an IP, you get a 302 redirect. You can also signature off the 302 redirect and start searching that thing for the path that it wants to send the host to, or the client to. Headers, information, kind of the same as the cookies, or just find different metadata that Shodan itself has collected. Like you can see, it's identified the product of this device to be a Pulse Secure. It also has the same HTTP title. So you kind of have two choices, right? Do I go with Pulse Secure in the title or just Pulse Secure as the product? I chose go with the product. So 24,000 of these are there. Sometimes these results will be very complex. There's going to be a ton of data, so you can also download it into a JSON file and then write some Python code or use JQ or one of those tools to kind of chew through it and start finding commonalities. One of the pro tips, if you're good with Python and you don't have $10,000 for that enterprise license, you can just write a Python script, download all of this, like take your target network, download everything, run through the Python, and find all the self-signed certs yourself, right? It saves you some money if you can't afford the license, and you get the same net result. So, some case studies. I kind of make it a game when I see new vulnerabilities get announced, things get dropped on the internet. My goal is how fast can I find them, how many of it can I find them, and like how accurate is it? And I try to share this with people. Just in my opinion, I should be helping others defend their networks and not just hoarding all this information. So the Pulse VPN vulnerability that I mentioned, that was the one TravelX got hit with, and I think a few other businesses. This came out last summer. Initially, Shodan didn't have any sort of a detection for it, right? They do have a significant amount of lag between something getting announced and them being able to pick it up, both in building the fingerprint or the test, and then it does take a while for them to scan 4 billion IP addresses. So they may not get it in there tomorrow, but it doesn't mean attackers are waiting, right? You need to find this yourselves, protect your network, don't rely on Shodan, use it as a tool to find this stuff. So initially, as I mentioned, the 302 redirect for that Pulse device sent you to this /danana page. You could just search that, find them all. A few months later, Shodan did add a vulnerability tag, but it would have been too late if you'd been waiting around. So this was a fun one. With Citrix, I actually ended up building about a dozen different detections for this. This is the one that I kind of went with, which is the HTTP WAF of the NetScaler. This one was unique in that Shodan actually added a detection like 2 or 3 days after people started seeing exploitation, because they understand that it's important. But this is the little pro tip, and 125,000 of these things. Now these aren't just VPN devices, these are also Citrix makes load balancers. They all show up as the same device. This was a fun one. So Microsoft, MSRC, actually the team I work for, we released some patches in January for RD Gateway, which it was actually the UDP transport service that runs on 3391. At the time, Shodan didn't actually scan UDP 3391. So I sent him an email and said, hey, could you start scanning this? In the meantime, I'm going to go and start digging around. What I did was, we have an RDP gateway system at Microsoft. There's one that we use for our own corporate stuff. So I just said, what does Shodan know about it? As I dug in, I realized that RD Gateway, most of these things are not just going to run UDP, there's also going to be RD Web running. When you dig into the page of RD Web, there is a logon field. Nobody's ever going to change this, right? Nobody's going to go in and tweak the HTML. It might even just break the product if you try doing it. So TD domain username label is a field that's very unique, and it's very easy to search, and then lo and behold, I have 20,000 RD Web servers. Because of the way that UDP works, it's pretty much impossible to detect with Shodan if it's actually running RDG Gateway. So what you would need to do here is you would download all the results and then write some code to say, okay, if I'm running UDP 3391 and I have RD Web running on there, that's almost a guaranteed RD Gateway machine. So in closing on these, this is not new stuff. I always find it funny. I'm proud to be here. I'm honored to be here. I do kind of find it funny that 30 years after I started hacking into networks, I'm sitting up here talking about the same problems and the same mistakes that people were making in the 90s. 0 days are very expensive, right? Everybody knows, like as Dave said earlier, we do a lot of work at Microsoft making Windows harder. People are trying to make every piece of software more secure, less exploitable. But you know what's not expensive? Mistakes. And attackers are going to thrive on your mistakes. Your oversight, you're like, I'll do it, and I'll do it on Monday. It's fine, boss. It's fine. We have a weekend. It's cool. No, it's not. Like, they're going to come in and they're going to take advantage of this stuff. As you know, you don't want to be the statistic, right? So, what I would advise is you need to be assessing your network on a regular basis. Right? We all understand. Most people have a love-hate relationship with Patch Tuesday. You have to reboot all your machines once a month. Well, if you're rebooting your machines once a month, why aren't you also taking a look at what your internet exposure is? Like, something may have changed, especially if you're running in cloud deployments where you may have people that you don't know are spinning up different things and subscriptions. If you've got some of these things like the express route back into your corporate network, if your cloud subscription gets hacked, that's a gateway back inside your network, right? You need to keep keeping tabs on this stuff. So monthly basis, or you can, anytime an exploit gets disclosed, you can follow me on Twitter if you like, because I always post this stuff as soon as I see it and build a signature. I just put it on Twitter for anybody else to have. Or anytime something changes, right? If you have to, once again, if you acquire a company or you reorg or maybe you deploy a new office or you do something changes on your network, you need to just be doing, just scan it, check it out. Like none of this stuff is complicated. You can do this in 15 or 20 minutes. And that amount of time, like if you can't spare 15 or 20 minutes, I don't know how to help you. And with that, thank you very much, BlueHat. Thank you for having me.